Okay, so only 50 videos in out of maybe 150 that we're going to do about. So we're about one third of the way in, and I had an idea about audio fidelity. I was like, you know what? That sounds. I don't have the time to listen to all these now. When I get the advance to write the book that I'm working on, this is research, so when I talk about my own life and my own narrative, I can go through these videos and capture November of 2018, but also I can capture my run through my own autobiographical information. Um, and then this is a framework. And then as I remember more details or I meditate on this, stony mornings, or just wherever thoughts come from, I can put them into this framework. But listening to the first couple videos just to check the fidelity, I like better how I was talking in the beginning. And as I approached stuff really dense in emotion, like the war, which when you talk about the death of your family and your friends, and I think I just read an article the other day about how we've spent or committed $6 trillion to these wars, and the budget of the United States is only 2 to 3 trillion a year. So it's a huge obstacle to deal with as far as unpacking, trying to solve. Um, from what I've remembered, and I knew these things, I'm just putting them to the forefront for my own edification and other people when they get to know me. I like being the underdog and I like insurmountable challenges. I think any really hard headed, adventurous spirit likes that. But as the emotions come up and your back gets pushed against the wall, your emotional intelligence comes out. I think it's a useful evolutionary trait, and I think animals live more in that moment. And the point of many meditations are to put us back in that moment, but without the outburst and more of the wisdom. The wisdom of an animal is that lion staring into the plain, that dog who's just happy being a dog. The tools and of self-defense of the animal is the fact that they can defend themselves without guilt, or they just act. So when you're acting emotionally, that's good, because if someone's threatening you, maybe you have to get mad, angry, scared, something. But your emotions, I feel, are just as any other function of your human body. It's there for a reason. A really cool example of this is I always get runny noses. I used to get them a lot when I was growing up, but I grew up in the desert here in the Inland Empire. Right now I'm in Ontario, just a couple miles below Foothill, which is the Highway 66. So Main Street, USA is what they call it. Route 66 goes across the whole United States. Right now I'm just a couple miles below it, right outside or in Ontario, with and then we have a huge shipping corridor that goes through here, brings a lot of goods and services through the United States. Ontario now just surpassed Atlanta as the largest shipping transportation hub. And then we already, I said in an earlier video, we ship a lot of stuff from the Long Beach ports that comes in from China too. And then the majority of that goes through the Ontario airport. That's why we have Amazon out here, and we have UPS. And I've seen Amazon develop since I was young, and then coming back here and seeing the warehouses they're buying. And in my town, the orange groves are being torn down or paved over to make way for warehouses. So this is Main Street, USA, and it's Shipping Container Warehouse, USA. So it's a really nice context to come back here, not only to be with my folks, but to put a context to our current culture and society economically. But that's why we're doing these videos, to get these thoughts and ideas as they come from an organic source through my normal life. But they don't have to sound like shit. So I think it's going to sound a little bit better with a mic right in front of me. Before, it was about a foot farther away on the laptop. And yeah, it only took me a couple weeks and 50 videos to figure that out. Hopefully we knock this out in a couple more weeks. I have to increase the production time, which means we can't talk so much like this casually. So I'm going to knock out the next 16 videos, hopefully in 10 to 20 minutes each, because they're all a very similar theme. We're going to look at I like Americans. I like Americans. And also, when you talk about politics, it's cool. That's why I talk about sex or girls and other stuff. You have to lighten it up. If we're just talking about politics, I'm going to depress myself. And these videos are first and foremost for me, for the writing process, and also the human process. It's a form of video diary. But we have to talk about the other things that round out my personality, not just my passions. I noticed that end of 2017, when I first took a stab at writing a holistic narrative of my life that unified all these different parts of all these different experiences, which seemed very, very separate, and it was starting to sabotage my work. My heart fell out of real estate. It was starting to sabotage my relationships. When I meet people, I have these relationships. I soon was able to, not soon, but in my later 20s, and we're going to get to that, my first ones, where I had a girlfriend off and on for like 5 years, but we were solid for the first couple. And then I had another one off and on for a couple of years, but we were solid for, the first little bit. But why do I pull back? Why do I draw back? We can say that men, it's hard for them to commit, which might be true in my case as well. Our proclivity is just to spread our seed and just, inseminate as many as possible. And we have to appeal to our more noble natures in order to settle down. Whereas with a woman, you only have so many eggs. Maybe there's a biological discrepancy between monogamy between the sexes, and we make a truce when we come into a relationship. And I know throughout human history, it seems like men and women have always struggled with monogamy. And I can't speak about homosexual relationships, so I try to give the experiences to those who experience them. So for those who experience the relationships or things that I don't, then it's up to them to describe them. Just like it's up to women to describe womanhood. Biologically, I'm a man, and I can't really speak on that. Can't speak on people who are intersex as well, the translators in between. But historically, they've also proven to have a role because they can tell us a little bit about both worlds. So, but as a man and as a human being, trying to explain this experience that I'm going through, I run into difficulties finding my other half, that coupling instinct that humans seem to have, even if it's only temporary, because you want temporary affection and intimacy, or if it's more permanent because you're looking for a life partner. Haven't really figured that out yet, but the politics gets in the way, the other things, the narratives that, and I keep coming back to this word, so I guess it's what I'm going to stick with. There's factual reality, observable and verifiable, and then there's narratives. We never absolutely know factual reality, so the scientific method is our way to correct our version of factual reality as new information comes in, and we test it and we have hypotheses. So science is never done. It's a process by which we establish truth, which is ever changing. The same way you can say that common law, or whatever you call case law, or whatever the Western tradition of establishing truth through the courts is, it's an organic evolving process. So the systems that we have by which we establish truth, whether through science or through law, or even personally what I'm doing with my narratives, it has to be iterative. And then I've applied that concept to businesses, and also to when I work with technology, and it seems to hold true. So you want, that's why I tell people I'm 51% right, just a little bit more than half. If you're less than half right, you're probably going to be in a destructive loop. But if you're more than half right, you should be able to correct towards improvement, I would imagine. I think weighed against the average person, I've proven on objective measures to be in the top 10th percentile, 5 percentile, 95% physically and mentally. But on a personal scale, if I'm just trying to correct myself, you want more humility and more ability to, because if what I've noticed in my life, if my deficiency mainly is ego, smart people, they're their own enemies, then let's just allow for more correction. And then the stuff that maybe I'm already working on. I don't have to pay attention too much to, or you further improve that. I've chosen as I look back on this life, I've chosen the harder path a lot of ways, and it's only made me better. So inviting more correction will only make you better as well. So I like Americans. We had just talked about decibels and the war did, and we talked about Rachel. So Rachel was in my life for a little bit. I was starting to learn how to develop that normal relationship, not all or nothing, not, throw my heart into everything. I was starting to accept the fact that that addicted girl, Addie, is what we'll call her. She needed to change herself, but I couldn't help her anymore. Um, just I mentioned earlier, some people you can tell them about the electric fence. Some people have to see it for themselves. Some people have to pee on the electric fence. So I had to go in the military to find out it wasn't for me, even though a lot of people who knew me said, this isn't really like your personality. You don't like doing your homework, you challenge authority. They're going to, crack your head if you do that in the military. And sure enough, I got my head cracked. So the same thing with the girl. I knew that probably the best way to get love isn't just to give a girl stuff over and over and just like be like a puppy dog begging for her affection. But I had to try that out. But I didn't swing. I tried it out with an open, sincere heart, and she's still in my life, and we're really good people to each other. So I didn't swing the opposite way and become misogynistic or angry or bitter. I think that's because I had a lot of love at home, and also I was proven to myself that I had other opportunities. So when she was in my life, she would reject me. She's the type of girl who will try to run your shit, will try to use your insecurities against you and this and that. I don't know still if it's too purposeful, if she's even self-aware of what she's doing, or if she's modeling about behavior she's learned from her mother maybe, or other women around her. Or also, if you think about it, a small young girl, and she's tiny, very small frame, her manipulation is a self-defense mechanism, and she didn't really have, and when we talk about her childhoods and stuff, she didn't have many people protecting her from the dangers of the world. And so these claws, these self-defense mechanisms, I seem to thrive or get along with. You could call them like bad bitches, you can call them thoughts, you can call them whatever negative term you want, but I like them, and I've learned not to love them romantically. Uh, that's actually become somewhat of a deal breaker. Women who use their sexuality too much to get what they want romantically. But those seem to be my friends. I put it on the table, I seem to know how to interact with them. And if they want to come at me straight, we can have something. But I think Addie was my practice, where I was always in control of my own narrative, and I didn't come at her like she used other guys. That's how I avoided falling into an addiction habit with her. I gave her things, but I cut her off. And I told her this later on, when I thought she was still trying to play me. I was like, when I interact with you, I put you in a sandbox, and I draw, a circle around you, a container. So I know going into it how much I'm willing to give, and that's my own choice. But if you try to take more than that, then I cut you off. And I've done a lot of things still for her, and now she's on her feet. She's done a lot of things for me this year when I pretty much didn't have money this year. I was relying on the support of my friends, and out of all my friends, she really came through with me a lot, for me a lot. So that selfless connection we have, and when she complains a little bit, I just bring up just a little bit, not like it's supposed to be. Friendship shouldn't be a balance where you're constantly keeping score, but sometimes people lose perspective because I know I'm trying to be self-aware right now, and people lose perspective of what you've done for each other. So not that you want a reciprocity, that I did this for you, you do that for me, but just to remind people, look it, I just need someone right now. And don't forget, like, I just think people can forget sometimes, especially if you were on a long spiral, downward spiral. It's almost overwhelming to remember all of those things that you did and all of those favors you called on other people. So I don't want to throw it in her face some, but perspective and context, is really important. When I say I feel like that's weak logic, so I'm paying attention when I say that. So anyways, so Rachel was probably the first real light out of that tunnel, proving that I can go. I mean, I had other girls I'd hit on and other other ways I knew that people were attracted to me, but Rachel was the first reciprocal. Like, we actually like had the beginnings of a relationship. It was fully like reciprocated physically and stuff. I dropped her off at her. Well, I won't get into that because her name's here, so I don't want to talk too much about the personal side of it. But okay, so that was great. And then also, I'm in this really good headspace where I'm writing a lot of poetry. And then when I left Rachel, I realized it's me. It's not these girls. Like, even if Addie had been with me, the politics would have taken me away from that. I wanted the experience, but did I really want love right now? Did I really want to commit to someone? Because now I have someone awesome. Addie's still the most inspirational person I've met artistically. I do feel like I need that passionate artist, and that's why some of us, with this save a home mentality where we're looking for troubled girls, I think we're looking for inspiration and creativity. It's just the troubled ones don't get traction in this world, and so their trouble comes from not having an outlet for that creativity, maybe. The boring ones turn us off. And then what are you left with? It's hard to be creative and individualistic in a world that wants conformity. So I think sometimes guys who chase problem girls, troubled girls, have a bad rep. And it's not that we want to save them. It's just they're the only interesting ones. And everyone else is a little boring. But Rachel was interesting. She was just wild enough and crazy enough. But again, balance between her and this poetry I was writing. I like Americans. This is already a long video. I like Americans. So when I had that reading, and I was like, all right, all of these changing lanes and gears. I've read a lot about the Iraq War. I feel like I have an objective view of what's actually going on between 2003 and 2008 since we invaded. Those books all came out in like 2007 that I read. So I'm like 25, 26. Turning 27 maybe, and I feel like I have objective reality outside the dominant narratives, which are just power trying to tell us, $6 trillion. They had to steal that money somehow. So that money is not like one person's holding 6 trillion. There's multiple crimes, multiple war profiteers. There's a lot of documentaries about a lot of the shenanigans that went on to hide that money, to steal it through no bid contracts and stuff, but that's in summary, a small group of people raided the public treasury and have killed a lot of people for it, also supporting this global economic system which seems to prey upon natural resources regardless of the people who happen to be living on top of them. And then they have their own narratives to back up why they feel that's just. So I have to challenge those narratives. And I'm starting to read. I went to school enough to know a little bit about the canon. I haven't really read many of the classics. I had this suspicion that if I did, I would become indoctrinated like everyone else. So just like the military, I just peek my head into the door, and I duck back out, make sure I'm forming my own opinions, challenge my views, duck back out. If I'm too much one thing, I try to do another thing. At this point, I want to test myself objectively. I have this book of poetry by Ernest Hemingway. He's a writer. He wasn't known as the greatest poet. It's actually said to be not the best poetry. So I thought this is an easy thing to challenge, pick out. Just like recently this last year, I noticed I had a lot of animosity towards Joe Rogan. Why? I don't know the guy. He's kind of a goofy, older man. But I was wondering about that, and he got into podcasting right about the time that I did, and I went around California running for governor as a writing candidate. Only I didn't put that much ego and effort into it because I was more just learning and doing it for the experience. Joe's an example of someone who did put a lot of ego and effort into it, and that's why he's where he's at now. So I see this path where we separated, but me and him both saw it. I mean, I saw it as soon as phones could take this type of video and things were blowing up. 2010, I was like, I saw where it was going. So did Joe, so you have to give him credit. I guess my animosity comes from what he's done with it and the platform. But then the same with, and I bring him up like Ernest Hemingway. The wisdom comes from realizing that your emotions are a projection, just like in romance, insecurities, and that I'm upset because he's not doing what I would do. But I can't be upset about his character because that would be judging. We don't want to do that. And trying to be more Eastern philosophy, like not moral, not good or bad. So when he speak in moral terms, catch yourself. But I've always believed that the Tao which can be spoken isn't the real Tao. I had it before I found it. Now that I found it and I'm formalizing my system of thought, I'm probably losing the intuitive one that I was born with, that calmness that always attracted good into my life. So remember always that your joy and wisdom is innate, so that way these systems don't get in the way of what you intuitively already know. If you want to relate it to like Star Wars, use the Force. Why did Luke put away the machine and then just use his mind to shoot that last shot into the Death Star? That's a metaphor for not relying too much on your tools. My cousin who told me, if you're not a man before you went in the army, you're not going to be a man when you get out. Because being a man is a personal discovery, it's a personal path. It's not something someone gives to you like a medal or a badge or a ribbon on your chest. So we all know this. That's why it rings true. Wisdom is the stuff that when you hear it, you recognize it even though you've never heard it before. Wisdom is the way that a cliche, after hearing it all your life, with the right experience, all of a sudden rings true. And then when you try to explain that experience, now you're just speaking in cliches too. The word ineffable means not being able to describe it in words. And real wisdom approaches the indescribable because you just have to feel it, but that's why it translates to every aspect of your life and to different subjects. So I felt that kernel in me of wisdom. Now I needed an objective measure to add these facts that I've been finding and these false narratives that I'm feeling are burdening me, not just in my personal development, and then so I want to prove myself. So I'm going to rewrite Ernest Hemingway's poetry. So a lot of these that are going to come up in the next 16 videos are me rewriting his poetry, and then some of them are my own. You can tell that my own are more sing-song, more lyrical. I play instruments, and I think I've always had melodies in my head, so my poetry usually has more form. But then some of these are syntactical interpretations where I'm taking Hemingway's form and where he uses a certain type of word I do, or similar, or if not exact syllable count. And a lot of times you use the same words or the same images. But I start with my own theme and my own. And then also that gives me a poetic, because this is all just me practicing. This is still me practicing. I'm working towards my first official book deal and my first official transition. I think after real estate last year, I realized, all right, I've proven I can start a career, but did I start the right career? Made $500,000 in real estate, that's great. Now I've rounded out that personality where like I have all these skill sets that I've proven objectively, and now without ego, but just with objective measures, I can kind of plot out the life that I want. Whereas when people say fake it till you make it and that other stuff, I've never believed in that. I've always believed in quantitative measures. Never really listened to what anyone says until I can prove it for myself, or I have some sort of measurement. The skeptic, the life of a skeptic. Examine everything, including yourself. So, but I think around 2017, the end of 2017, I was with enough bullshit clients where I was like, I'm too good for this. I've proven I can make money. When I started real estate, I felt really intimidated and felt like, honestly, I was below my clients, less responsible than them and this and that. But once I got the credit they had, the money they had, still haven't learned how to save money, but I think that's another psychological issue I'm working on. I've kept myself vulnerable for a reason, to learn certain lessons. And I think that's what this year was about. Just how low can I go? Just let go of everything and free fall. And I think this year has been enough suffering. This has been a walk of suffering. It's been interesting. That's where I did heroin. It's like, what else can I do? What else? Luckily, I didn't fall too far, searching for a fight I never got. So this little self-destructive phase, I think, is coming to a close. But I was in a creating phase. I like Americans. This is a syntactical. I forgot. I have to look up the Ernest Hemingway poems. There's a very small volume, Ernest Hemingway, where I got these from, and you can pretty much tell which ones. I think he said, I like Europeans. I like French. I don't know. It's very similar to his poems, but in the time frame, like about 2006 to 8, of what my mind was in. I like Americans. I like Americans. They are so unlike the rest of the world. They do not take their politicians seriously. They go abroad to drink, not to criticize. They claim that they are winning the war, but they know that but they know at heart that they aren't. They have such respect for commerce. They like to live abroad. They do not brag about how they take baths, but they take them. Their teeth are so good. And they wear BDUs all the year round. I wish they didn't brag about it. They have the best nuclear arsenal in the world, but they never mention it. They would like to have Bill Gates for president, but they would never elect him. They saw through Saddam. They have been promised by Obama. Their celebrities have such funny habits. They are hard to suck in on the world. Their goods come from somewhere out there. They produced Google, Batman, and hip-hop. They do not hang murderers. They rescind their book deals. They watch The Daily Show and believe in capitalism. When they make money, they make a lot of money. They are fine people. So yeah, how much do I disagree with the given narratives going on around me? You could just, let's see, go abroad to drink, not criticize. This goes back to when we started the Iraq War, there was a lot of worldwide protests. And there still is, but see how fast we get distracted over 10 years? By 2008, we still were electing most members to Congress on an anti-war platform. Trump, when he was elected, pulling the troops out was still a large part of his rhetoric. But what I'm attempting to do as in my approach to politics and meditating on it this last year is define objective reality as best I can with the scientific tools that we've used as a civilization and culture. And then identify the narratives and the split between the two. So that way, when we engage in politics, we can point out narrative is a polite way to say someone's lying to you. We need that more subtle way because people are lying to you and themselves without even realizing it. So looking into the psychology of why people follow authoritarians, how much ability people have for cognitive dissonance and self-deception, you can't blame them too much. You can't blame people for following bad leaders. You do want them to take personal responsibility, but I'm trying to give as many tools as possible to cure them. And that's also how I feel over this last 5-6 years. After I was in Occupy Wall Street and I felt like I had my head on really well. The Complete American's Guide to Revolution, I feel, is the pinnacle of my clear intellectual thought. I had a lot more work to do, and real estate gave me a lot more pieces to the puzzle to explain the situation in which I find myself in. I think any human finds themselves in this world, or especially an American, Complete American's Guide to Revolution. But I was very clear thinking back then. And then I think I've earned that now over this year, especially over these last couple months of doing these videos. As more thoughts come out and I read this old stuff, I remember more and more about who I was. It's not like I'm not that now, but I had a lot of other layers on top of it, which now I'm getting rid of. Worry less about money, I know it'll come. Worry less about love and sex, I know it'll come. But that only happens when you've experienced love and money and sex, and when you and so I'm going to relate how I got to those positions of comfort, those comfortable levels where I'm not stressed out about money even when I don't have it. I'm not stressed out about companionship. So I just read this. I felt like I needed to catch up every now and then when I get too emotional. Not too emotional, but when my voice gets higher and my speech gets more rapid, remind myself of the person I like to be in my best of times. I said during that mushroom trip when on my birthday, which I processed a lot of stuff and I recorded it, so I have hours of tape to go over. I still haven't, because if you listen to it and you feel a little embarrassed, a little ashamed, that's good. There's a lot of emotions to unpack. But it's like wine. I'm going to come back to it. The more time goes, the more I grow, and then the more of a difference between that person and then me now. And then if that person predicted some of the changes that I have now we're exploring how your mind changes. Maybe the subconscious that bubbled up during that trip 9 months later now has manifested itself more in my conscious. Some of the ideas, I remember some of the phrases I said. But one of the things I said is, this is who I like to be. Because my practice, I was born calm, but my practice and how I deal with life and my practice with psychedelics helps me practice being even more calm. Because you have to be. Rule number one when you're tripping, if you're excitable, you're going to be a danger to yourself and others. You're not in objective reality. You're in something else. some people try to define that reality as if some place that we visit or some place they get all spiritual with it. Again, I'm a skeptic. I'm more interested in what's useful. And what has been useful for me is while I'm tripping, I practice lowering my energy physically. When I did them on my birthday, I was sick. I was getting better off of something, so I felt like throwing up, and I had to. All the trip was coming up, and it's only getting more intense. Breathe so I wouldn't throw up, and so you can hear me sometimes like breathing heavily, and I don't think I was chanting, but some people who when they trip, they've told me like if you're starting to lose it physically or mentally, you have a practice that centers you. Well, that's only going to help you in the real world as well. So that has taught me also. So I said that my favorite mental space to be in is like after 50 deep breaths. And I don't even think I've ever consciously done 50 deep breaths where you something like that. Not even like looking at a time or anything. Just hold it as long as you can before it gets uncomfortable. And then release again as long as you can. But because everyone's different, it's not a time thing, it's more of an intuitive thing. I'm not holding my breath, I'm just breathing as slow as comfortably possible. Do it for 50 breaths. Your whole body's going to calm down. I think right now I'm so chill because I'm going back to the gym, and this has been my first week back. And that's a whole nother body of wisdom that you get. The physical wisdom you get from practicing to make your body stronger is the same that you get from practicing to make your mind stronger. And you get this testosterone, you get this animalistic, you get a pump, you get like King Kong, no one got shit on me. But controlling that like you control a trip, like psychedelics, that will become a calm because it becomes a source of confidence. And the strong can afford to be compassionate. That's something I said when I was young. When the person who is feeling threatened is the one who's anxious in the animal world or in the human world. And the calmest among us usually are the strongest. I believe in that wisdom too. So I think this going back to the gym has mellowed me out. Also, just energy. I feel sore. I'm exhausted. If you really hit it hard, then you feel the depleted energy. So I think these videos are going to sound better. And we're in that gear I like to be in, which we can get pushed out of by our emotions, which is okay too, because then we're recording it and we can learn from it. And also it's an honest expression. If someone's just super monotone the whole time, that's how Eastern philosophy gets the reputation for being cold. And then also I get the reputation for being cold. Something I didn't mention, talking about Addie so much because she was so formative. I learned so many lessons for not actually being with her, just by avoiding being with her, or by her rejecting me and me turning it into a positive as opposed to a negative, and holding on to my narrative that like I'm not a loser that she thinks I am, and I'm not a because I think she looked down on me like I wasn't like a normal dude that she was being with. But look at those dudes and look at me. Once you get older, you realize these people in your life are there for a reason. So what was I gonna see? That was defensive emotion of like, and then it knocked a good thought out of my head. But I was gonna say something positive that strong emotions are good. I'm going to speak in another part of my website about the girls in my life and everyone I've been with physically. There's like 35, 36 so far, and all the things I've learned from each one of them, and that's going to be fun. So yeah, that's all of these are ways to find out what's in that head and how did it get there, and do I want to keep it there or do I want to upgrade? Do I want to change the foundational programming language of my mind? And what I've learned this year is you change slowly but surely, but you don't change quickly. I'm calmer and hopefully smarter than I was at the beginning of the year. An objective metric, my chess scores are going up. So always with those objective metrics. And I think I'm these videos are probably going to start sounding better too. But we're a third of the way in. It's another reason to stay calm is this is a lot of work, and we're 35 minutes and this video was supposed to be 10, so we have a lot of work ahead of us. Grind it out. I like Americans.